Hey folks, we're going to talk about meditation for a second. I get a lot of questions about how to start meditating, keeping in mind that I had a very severe allergy to the word and concept of meditation for a very long time, more than a decade, and I've only really consistently started meditating and implemented meditating for the last 2 to 3 years. There are a few easy ways to get started, but before I talk about that, what is meditation? There are a few ways you can look at it. I think the simplest way to look at it as a type A personality is either as a warm bath for your mind so that you relax in such a way, maybe it's only 10%, to reduce your anxiety so you can be more effective and productive. Less reactive, in other words. You don't get carried away by knee-jerk emotions and judgments, obsessing on the past, something that happened, or something in the future, planning, etc. You're able to actually single task and focus. That is one of the outcomes, one of the benefits of different types of meditating. All right, and that can take the form of something very short or something a little more involved. I'll talk about both. The other, and this is why I think meditation can be viewed in a way as Stoic training, or in some ways similar to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because the objective is to help you to observe your state and your thoughts so that you are less controlled by them. What does this mean? I'll use an analogy that I think was originally shared with me by Andy Puddicombe, who is the founder of something called Headspace, which I'll talk about in a second, which is the difference in effect being, say, standing out in the storm, getting pelted with rain and hail and wind and stinging your eyes and so on, being soaking wet, or standing inside looking through the glass at the storm. The latter is meditation. The way I've put it before, which is slightly different, it's the difference between being in the washing machine or standing outside looking into the washing machine. And when you have that somewhat detached observer perspective, you can just be much calmer, much more appreciative, and ultimately effective. I do not think that meditation causes you to lose your edge. This was a concern of mine, and I think it's a concern of a lot of type A driven people. But even if it did cause you to lose, say, 10%, who cares? Ultimately, you're trying to succeed and make more money, do all these things, build a bigger business to improve the quality of life for yourself or others, and you achieve that, I think, more directly in many cases by, even if you had to take, say, a 10% haircut on your edge, by improving your present state awareness by much, much more, 50 to 100%. So let's jump into a couple of options, right? So if you're not a dog, because dogs are always present state aware, then you need some human tools. One option, and this is the way I started very early on meditating, was listening to one song. So find one song that puts you into a good mood, and in the morning, all you're going to do is sit comfortably. So this could be sitting in a chair, feet on the floor, just like this, hands in your lap. You generally are going to want some type of back support. You do not need a dog chewing on a squeaky toy. So I may intervene. Molly, come here. Or we'll grab that. There we go. Or you can sit like this, which is how I tend to sit when I meditate. So this is not full lotus, this is half lotus. It's not even half lotus, it's really just one foot tucked into the crease of my calf and thigh. And then I'm going to kind of pull the butt cheeks so that I have a nice little seat here, back flat. And then my hands are either going to be in my lap like so, or I will actually post my hands on my thighs like this, which can also help if you have a tendency of slouching to keep your back straight. All right. Listen to one song. For me, it was We're Gonna Party Like It's 1999, Prince. It's hard to be stressed out, worrying about things if you listen to that song, trust me. You can pick whatever poison you like, but this was shared with me by Kamal Ravikant. And he suggested listening to one song, doing nothing in particular other than listening to the song and breathing, and that's 3 to 4 minutes. That's it. So you can try that in the morning. That was one of the first approaches I took. The second approach, which I think is very, very effective and best for many people, is some form of guided meditation. This means that instead of sitting by yourself, and being completely dependent on whatever's happening in your mind and developing that skill of observation, you're listening to something. And that could be any number of different types of audio. So one would be, and there are many different types, recorded guided meditations by people like Sam Harris, so samharris.org. He is a neuroscience PhD, or Tara Brach. So Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H, who I've had on the podcast, the Tim Ferriss Show, has a fantastic audio called the 2010 Summer Smile Meditation. You can find it for free. And some incredible folks like Maria Popova, for instance, who runs Brain Pickings, listen to that every morning and credit it with really changing their lives. So those are two you can find immediately just searching right after this video. You can also use guided meditation that is more progressive. It's almost like weight training. There's progressive resistance or progressive difficulty, and there are many good options out there. So I've used, say, Headspace for weeks and weeks at a time. It is a very easy way to meditate also if you're, say, sitting in a plane or sitting in a car, and you can drop in your earphones and you're good to go. Another would be Calm. There are a number of different varieties and options here. Let's say that you've listened this far and you're like, God, I'm not some hippie woo-woo person. I just want to perform better. Really don't care about this thing that you're calling meditation. Okay, well, I have an option for you. Because even in my own mind, I wonder, when I see the benefits of meditation, which are generally better sleep, less dependence on caffeine, you become much more sensitive to things like caffeine and alcohol, better ability to execute and focus on the important things. So maybe I'm not doing 100 things, I'm doing 20, but the 20 are better thought through and more important, in fact. I wonder, though, is the benefit coming from simply sitting with really good posture for 10 to 20 minutes? Is it coming from the breathing? Is it coming from closing my eyes and doing the breathing? Is it coming from the exercise that I'm doing inside my own head, whatever that might be, or something else? I happen to think a lot of it is from the breathing. All right, now, if you then want to skip meditation, you could download an app called Apnea Trainer, which has pranayama breathing, and it is designed for free divers. I do not recommend doing any of these breathing exercises before getting in water. You can cause yourself a lot of trouble unless you have highly qualified professional instruction. Okay, but the Apnea Trainer, which was introduced to me by Gabby Reese, who's married to Laird Hamilton. So Gabby, incredible world-class athlete in her own right, and then Laird, who is I think most people would say the undisputed king of big wave surfing, at least was for decades, introduced me to this, and it will have you do different types of breathing patterns, and it will count you down. So it might say 5-second inhale, 5-second hold, 10-second exhale, 5-second hold. That would be one type that you could use, pranayama. Or you could do something like 5-second inhale, 20-second hold, 10-second exhale, and then back to repeat that cycle. And just listening to the counting and breathing along with it, I find to be extremely calming and centering. I almost do all of my meditation earlier in the day, in the morning. I try to do it before turning on the phone. So if you look at my phone right now, well, first there's a coyote on it, but that's a longer story. There is an airplane icon up here in the corner because I almost always have my phone on airplane mode. When I go to bed, it's in airplane mode, and I try not to turn it on because then you get the barrage of bullets, i.e. text messages and different notifications, which immediately puts you into a reactive mode. So before that, I like to meditate, feed my pooch, etc., and then, and only then, maybe after some journaling, turn on the phone. All right, other options for meditation, if you really want to get into it, what caused it to finally stick for me, and now I can play around with all these different options, but what really got me to meditate consistently was taking a class, and I took a Transcendental meditation class. That's tm.org. These are not cheap. I think they're somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000, which is, in my mind, kind of silly, but Rick Rubin, legendary music producer, had asked me if I'd ever tried TM at one point, and then I took his advice, but I looked into it and I decided, I don't want to have to pay $1,000 for someone to give me a mantra. What the hell's a mantra anyway? It's very skeptical, but continued to be very, very stressed out. And then Chase Jarvis, who's a very well-known photographer and CEO of a company called Creative Live, creativelive.com, you should check it out, it's fantastic, said, what do you have to lose? You can afford it. So even if it ends up being a complete waste of money, Now, he was the second person saying, I do TM twice a day. Why not just do it? You can afford to lose it, even if it's a total waste of time. So I did, and lo and behold, having someone to be accountable to who was teaching me every day, generally during lunch hour, and in between sessions was giving me the homework assignment of 2 meditation sessions, which I then had to report back on and discuss with said teacher. It was enough social pressure to get me to finally do it twice a day for 4 or 5 days. And at that point, that started an unbroken streak, I want to say, of about 1.5 years of meditating at least once a day, often twice a day. So that was really, I would say, one of the tipping points for me. If you want to get the gist of TM, and there's some weird aspects of the organization that I'm not a huge fan of, but it's surprisingly secular once you get past the first meeting. In the first meeting, you have to bring fruit and flowers, and they make an offering to the founder, and it's a little culty. But once you get past that, then it's like, okay, what do you do if you're in a hotel and room service comes in and you're halfway through meditation? What do you do? Do you stop? Do you talk to them? Do you just ignore them? What are the coping mechanisms? So it's very tactical, practical in my experience. But they insist that you need someone sort of as life support indefinitely to teach you TM. The basics are you get a mantra. I think they're probably all 2 syllables. And if you wanted to get a flavor for what that type of meditation is like, although I do think there's incredible value in having a teacher who holds you accountable, you could take, and they would disagree with this, but you could take some 2-syllable word, could be nonsense or not. You could use nature, right? Nature, 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 and say that over and over again. Literally, you're effectively just repeating that ad nauseum for the period of time in which you're doing the meditation. For transcendental meditation, they generally recommend 20 minutes first thing in the morning, and then 20 minutes, let's say, as Chase does it, right before dinner. All right. I almost always just do the morning meditation. Back in the day, I was more diligent about doing it twice a day. I do think there's a lot of value there, but if you just get it in the morning, there is a lot of value to be had. And beyond that, I would say if you wanted to start super small, you could just do an experiment. And the experiment is not 20 minutes in the morning, not 30 minutes twice a day. It's not a long guided meditation, nothing like that. And by the way, the apps I mentioned are generally modifiable in terms of duration. So you can do 10 minutes, 15. I did 10 for weeks at a time when I was on book deadline, for instance. But let's make it even shorter. What you could try, there are 2 different types. So one is something that I started doing for myself. Whenever I would get anxious or I felt myself maybe getting angry or a groundswell of emotion that I felt was unpleasant or unproductive, I would take what I call the 3-breath break. So a 3-breath break is exactly what it sounds like. You stop what you're doing. That's 1. Just do that 3 times. And it's amazing how well that defuses what could otherwise become really stupid or rash decisions. And pretty easy. So try to remember to do a 3-breath break. And you can do that for a day or 2. And very important, set that intention in the morning. So set that as a clear objective for the day. And then at night, review how often you used it, when you could have used it, when you didn't. This type of pre and post game is very important if you're going to do an experiment with something very small like that. And then I would say the next you could test, and this was in my latest book, Tools of Titans, but the basic gist, this is, I believe it's loving kindness meditation, but forget about the label because it sounds too woo-woo and it's weird sounding. But Meng, so Chade Meng Tan, who was previously at Google, so one of the very early engineers, he developed a course at Google available to employees called, I think it was Search Inside Yourself. And it quickly became the most popular course within Google. Thousands of employees. There was a wait list for, I think, 6 months. And he taught many different tools related to mindfulness and meditation. And one of them, which, and he tells a story that is in Tools of Titans, about a woman who tried it, had never done meditation before, and she said, I had my best day in 7 years. Okay, well, what provoked that? It's a very simple approach. And I've heard said, a number of people have said before that, I think Andy, I mentioned him before, has also said 10 minutes of meditating on other people or the wider world is worth 10 hours of meditating on yourself. All right, so let's assume that's true. One very easy way to test that out is when you're doing, say, your 3-breath break, or you just take a few minutes, 5 minutes, to sit down and in the morning, for instance, or whenever you're feeling stressed out, think about a few people you're grateful for and then wish them to be happy. That's it. So you just imagine 3 people you're really grateful for. They could be new relationships, old relationships, maybe childhood friends you haven't seen in a really long time, teachers from long ago. Think about them, and then you're just going to wish them happiness and hope that they are happy, and hold that in your mind for a few minutes. It sounds so silly and so simple, yet that is what this woman did, where she was in her office, and I think every hour she thought of a coworker and wished them happiness. And she did that for a few hours. She said, I had the best day in the office I've had in 7 years. So you can try that. Also very, very simple. So if you're like, I don't want to think about my breath or my this, my that, track my thoughts, I'm too scatterbrained, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Just think about a handful of other people, 2 or 3, and wish them happiness. It's so simple. I did this when I was finishing Tools of Titans, or I was about 2/3 of the way through, and I was overseas. And I did a sauna every night because a bunch of my guests do saunas every night. So I started doing it. And I would sit there, and I'd sometimes be doing editing by hand. I'd get too sweaty, get to a point where I couldn't do that. And I would sit there and I would do this loving kindness meditation. And I remember getting to the end of the week and thinking to myself and asking, why am I so happy? I mean, you kind of know you need to fix things if you ask yourself that. But I tend to be pretty tightly wound, very aggressive, and I focused a lot more on achievement than, say, contentment or happiness in most of my life. But man, that week was amazing. And there were other elements as well, but the main variable that I tweaked was this tiny, tiny exercise. And so in meditation, as in everything else, I think it pays to look for the very little tweaks that have very big payoffs. So hopefully that helps. Those are a few of the things that helped me to develop a mindfulness meditation habit. And last but not least, if you meditate for a period of time, then you fall off the train. Don't beat yourself up. Just get back on the train. It doesn't do you any good to self-flagellate because you missed 1 or 2 meditation sessions. This isn't the Olympics of meditating. So just get back on, and then you will see the results, and you then have the recipe that you can use anytime you want. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more, I have some fantastic stuff coming, including collaborations. Just click here and you'll be the first to see it.